Imagine two people sitting in the exact same room with the exact same resources, the exact same education, the exact same opportunities. One of them creates something groundbreaking, a revolutionary product, an artistic masterpiece, a business model that changes everything. The other person looks at the same situation and sees nothing but limitations. What's the difference? Why are some people naturally creative while others feel like they can never come up with original ideas? The answer isn't that creative people are born special or that they have some magical brain mutation. It's something far more interesting, far more scientifically fascinating, and most importantly, it's something you can actually develop and enhance. Welcome back. Today, we're exploring the psychology of creativity, how your brain actually generates new ideas, why some people seem endlessly innovative, while others struggle to think outside the box, and most importantly, how you can unlock your own creative potential. Let's start with a fundamental truth about creativity that most people get completely wrong. When we think of creative geniuses, we imagine these extraordinary individuals struck by lightning bolts of inspiration. Steve Jobs sitting under an apple tree and suddenly envisioning the iPhone. Picasso waking up one morning with a revolutionary new art style fully formed in his mind. But here's what neuroscience actually tells us. Creativity isn't about sudden inspiration. It's about consistent pattern recognition and recombination. Your brain's creative ability is based on how many diverse experiences, ideas, and information you've stored in your neural networks. The creative process is your brain taking these stored patterns and combining them in novel ways. This is called conceptual blending, and it's the foundation of all human creativity. Think about it this way. A creative person isn't someone with different brain hardware. They are someone who has gathered more unique raw materials and has trained their brain to see unexpected connections between them. When Steve Jobs talked about creativity being the ability to connect dots, he was describing exactly this process. He had dots from technology, dots from art, dots from philosophy, dots from business. His genius wasn't inventing new dots. It was seeing that when you combine a technology dot with an art dot in a particular way, you get something revolutionary. This is why the most creative people tend to be those who consume wildly diverse information, who read books about history, listen to different music genres, travel to different cultures, study completely unrelated fields. They're not doing this randomly. They're unconsciously building a massive library of patterns and connections their brain can later recombine. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Creativity isn't just about having more dots. It's about your brain being in the right neurological state to see connections between them. And this is where most people completely sabotage their own creativity without realizing it. Your brain has two primary modes: the focused mode and the diffuse mode. The focused mode is your default state. When you're concentrating, solving problems logically, working toward a specific goal, your brain is using your prefrontal cortex, the executive control center. Your attention is narrowed. You're filtering out distractions. You're working sequentially through problems. This mode is absolutely essential for productivity and getting things done. But here's the problem. Creativity doesn't happen in focused mode. Creativity happens in diffuse mode. Diffuse mode is when your brain is relaxed, unfocused, wandering. Your attention isn't pinpointed on anything specific. Your neural networks have room to fire in unexpected ways. This is why your best ideas come in the shower, during a walk, while you're driving, right before you fall asleep. Your brain isn't trying to solve the problem directly. It's allowing loose associations to form. It's making weird connections. It's combining patterns in ways that wouldn't happen if you were forcing yourself to focus. Yet, what do most people do when they're trying to be creative? They sit down, they open their laptop, they force themselves to focus intensely. They're essentially asking their brain to be creative while operating in the exact mode where creativity is impossible. This is why some of the world's most creative people have ritualized their diffuse mode time. Maya Angelou would rent a hotel room and spend mornings in bed thinking, not writing. The actual writing came later. Nikola Tesla would take long walks, sometimes covering miles, visualizing his inventions completely in his mind. He'd rarely write anything down during these walks. He was in pure diffuse mode, letting his brain make wild connections. When he returned to focused mode, he could build what he'd mentally designed. This isn't random behavior. These are people who understood, either consciously or intuitively, that creativity requires operating in a completely different brain state than focused work. The second component of creativity is what researchers call psychological flexibility. This is your ability to shift perspectives, to hold multiple viewpoints simultaneously, to challenge your own assumptions, and to tolerate ambiguity. Most people's thinking is rigid. You believe certain things, you've decided how the world works, and you interpret all new information through that framework. Your brain does this automatically to conserve energy. It's called cognitive rigidity. It protects you from constantly questioning everything, but it also kills creativity. A truly creative person has what's called cognitive flexibility. When they encounter a problem, they don't just have one solution framework. They can instantly shift to multiple perspectives. Here's a concrete example. A rigid thinker looks at a brick and sees a brick something used for building walls. A creative thinker looks at a brick and sees dozens of possibilities. A weight, a tool, a missile, a bookend, a canvas for art, a step up, a thing to sit on. This isn't because the creative person is smarter. It's because they've trained their brain to be flexible in how it categorizes and uses information. This is one of the reasons why diverse experiences create more creative people. When you're exposed to different cultures, different ways of thinking, different problem-solving approaches, you're training your brain to hold multiple frameworks simultaneously. You're building cognitive flexibility. The third element of creativity is what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, combined with low cognitive load. This matters more than most people realize. Here's the research. Creative output drops significantly when you have high external pressure or when you under cognitive stress. A student trying to come up with a creative solution while worried about being judged, about failing, about meeting someone else's expectations, their brain is in threat mode. Resources are diverted to anxiety management instead of creative processing. But a person working on something they're genuinely interested in, without external pressure, with their basic needs met, shows exponential increases in creative output. This is why many creative breakthroughs happen during periods of relative safety and stability. Not because comfort alone creates creativity that's false, but because when you're not worried about basic survival or judgment, your brain has more resources to dedicate to making novel connections. This explains why so many creative people seem to have had some form of privilege or support system. It wasn't that privilege made them talented. It was that privilege removed the cognitive load that would have prevented their talent from emerging. But here's what's crucial: intrinsic motivation is even more important than external conditions. You can have all the resources in the world, but if you're only creating because you think you should, because someone else wants you to, or because of external rewards, your creative output plummets. Studies on creative professionals show that those whose primary motivation is internal, because they love the work, because they're curious, because they enjoy the creative process itself, produce dramatically more innovative work than those motivated by money, fame, or approval. Now let's talk about one of the most counterintuitive aspects of creativity: failure. Creative people fail constantly. They fail more than non-creative people. But here's the crucial difference: they have a different relationship with failure. When a non-creative person fails, they internalize it. They think, I'm not creative, or I can't do this, and they stop trying. When a creative person fails, they see it as data. They see it as proof that they're experimenting, pushing boundaries, testing ideas. They see it as essential to the creative process. Neuroscientifically, this is because creative people have trained their brains through repeated exposure to something called productive failure. They've learned that failure at a new idea doesn't mean failure as a person. Their neural pathways associated with self-worth aren't directly connected to their creative outcomes. They can risk failure without it triggering shame or identity threats. This is learned. Children naturally have this. They're endlessly creative because they haven't yet learned to be afraid of failure. But as we get older, we learn that failure is bad, that we should only try things we'll succeed at. We start playing it safe. Our creativity atrophies. Creative adults are essentially those who've unlearned this fear of failure, often through deliberate practice and exposure. This is why constraints, paradoxically, often enhance creativity rather than limiting it. When people have unlimited resources and unlimited possibilities, they often become paralyzed. When you have constraints, a limited budget, a specific format requirement, a particular audience, your brain has to get creative. You can't solve the problem through brute force. You have to think laterally. Some of the most creative achievements in human history have come from severe constraints. The Beatles' early recordings in tiny studios with limited equipment forced them to be innovative with what they had. Film directors working with shoestring budgets have created revolutionary techniques that bigger budget films couldn't achieve. Constraints force creativity. There's also a phenomenon called the incubation effect that's absolutely crucial to understanding creative productivity. You work intensely on a problem, hit a wall, and then you stop. You go away. You do something completely different. Then hours or days later, the solution suddenly comes to you. This isn't coincidence. During the incubation period, your brain is unconsciously working on the problem. Your diffuse mode is engaging with the problem at a subconscious level. Meanwhile, your conscious mind has moved on. This is why so many creative people schedule their work in cycles intense. Focused work sessions followed by complete breaks where they do something different, something that requires a completely different part of their brain. But here's what most people do wrong. They feel frustrated when they hit a wall, so they push harder. They work longer hours. They maintain the intense focus. They're essentially trying to solve a diffuse mode problem with focus mode intensity. It's neurologically counterproductive. The research is clear. Taking breaks, shifting to different activities, even sleeping, these aren't interruptions to the creative process. They're essential components of it. This is why creative professionals often schedule their time in a particular way. Maximum focused work in the morning when their brain is fresh, then afternoon breaks. Then light creative work or diffuse mode activities like reading or walking. There's also an element of creativity we don't talk about enough. It requires courage. Not just the courage to fail, though that's important, but the courage to be different. to present ideas that might be rejected or criticized, to exist outside consensus. Every truly creative person has experienced the moment where they think, "This idea is too weird," or "People would judge me for this." The ones who become creative are the ones who put the idea forward anyway. This isn't just psychological, it has neurological correlates. Your brain has what's called a social pain circuit. When you risk social rejection or judgment, this circuit activates. It's as real and painful as physical pain. Creative people don't feel less social pain. They've just learned to tolerate it. They've learned that growth happens outside consensus. Finally, let's talk about what creativity actually is at its deepest level. It's not about being a creative person, as if creativity is some fixed trait you either have or don't have. Creativity is a skill. It's a set of mental habits and neural pathways that you can develop and strengthen. Someone who's creative isn't someone who was born with creative genes. They're someone who has practiced creative thinking, who has built diverse neural networks through diverse experiences, who has trained their brain to think in multiple modes, who has learned to tolerate the discomfort of being different, and who has learned to see failure as data rather than identity. This means the most important insight about creativity is this: you're more creative than you think. Your brain has the hardware. Most of your neurological limitation is learned, and what's learned can be unlearned and retrained. If you've told yourself you're not a creative person, that's a neural pattern you've reinforced through repetition. But neural patterns can change. Every time you practice seeing multiple solutions to a problem, you're building cognitive flexibility. Every time you make something and share it despite the fear of judgment, you're rewiring your social pain circuits. Every time you take a break instead of pushing through frustration, you're training your brain to use diffuse mode. Creativity isn't a mystery. It's a skill built through deliberate practice, diverse experiences, the right mindset, and a willingness to be different.